There's a moment almost everyone has lived through. You see a message, your mind forms a reply, your thumb hovers over the keyboard, and then something inside you quietly stalls. It isn't irritation, disrespect, or a sudden loss of interest. It's more like an internal dimming, a subtle pause you can't fully name, a mental softness that turns an easy response into something strangely heavy. Hours pass, then days, and the unfinished reply sits there like a small weight you keep stepping around. You didn't choose silence. It arrived on its own. People often misunderstand this behavior because on the outside it looks simple. Someone didn't reply. But inside, something very different is happening. The mind withdraws for reasons it rarely explains, slipping into a quiet space where even tiny tasks feel oversized. You remember the message, you care about the person, and yet the act of responding feels oddly distant, as if your emotional reach has shortened without warning. That gap between intention and action creates guilt, the kind that whispers, "Why am I like this?" even though you already know it wasn't on purpose. This experience isn't uncommon, but it stays unspoken because it feels embarrassing to admit. You fear sounding careless or disconnected, so you carry the silence alone, hoping you'll eventually snap back into the version of yourself who replies easily. But there's a deeper psychological mechanism behind this pause, one most people never recognize. It isn't laziness or avoidance. It's an internal process shaped by mental bandwidth, emotional sensitivity, and how your mind protects itself when it feels overloaded. This introduction is the doorway into that hidden world, because once you understand why this happens, the guilt softens and the pattern begins to make sense. What looks like a simple delay often reflects a mind that processes life more intensely than it shows. And before we explore the layers beneath this behavior, the cognitive load, the emotional fatigue, the identity traits, you need to know one thing: you are not alone in this pattern. What feels like a flaw is actually a clue pointing toward how your mind works. And understanding that is where real clarity begins. I'll walk you through each layer gently, helping you see the patterns you've lived with for years but never fully named. By the end, you'll understand why unintentional silence happens, and why it says more about your mind than your manners. There are moments when your mind doesn't shut down dramatically, but simply slips into a quieter mode, almost like a light dimming without warning. This emotional pause is subtle, often so gentle that you don't recognize it until you realize you've drifted away from the conversation you intended to continue. It feels like standing in a room filled with soft fog. Nothing is wrong, nothing is alarming, yet everything feels slightly distant, slightly heavier, slightly harder to reach. The reply you meant to send lingers in your thoughts, but the motivation to act on it fades, as if something inside you momentarily powered down. This micro shutdown isn't a decision. It isn't avoidance. It's the mind withdrawing just enough to make ordinary tasks feel strangely magnified. People who experience this shift often describe it as a quiet internal exhale, a moment where emotional energy thins out and the world around them softens. The message waiting for them doesn't lose importance, but their access to emotional engagement drops, creating a disconnect between intention and action. The pause isn't about the conversation. It's about the sudden heaviness that settles between thought and movement. Digital communication amplifies this emotional interruption. Phones deliver constant pings, expectations, and micro demands that accumulate in ways the mind struggles to filter. Every notification becomes another small pull on already thin emotional resources. The accumulated pressure creates a cycle where even simple interactions, like texting back, feel like stepping through thick air. What should take seconds now feels like weightlifting, not because of the person involved, but because the mind has momentarily retreated for self-preservation. This retreat shows up as silence, not because you don't care, but because your emotional bandwidth flickered. The disconnect is internal, invisible, and often misunderstood. No one sees the small flicker inside you that turns clarity into haze. No one notices how the world feels momentarily muted, or how your mind slips into a softer rhythm to cope with overwhelm. They only see the unanswered message, not the emotional pause that held you back. You experienced the shutdown, but others only witnessed the silence. This moment of withdrawal is closely tied to how your brain processes information. When mental noise builds up, the mind instinctively conserves energy, creating pockets of emotional stillness. And this is where the deeper explanation begins. Because behind every unintentional pause lies the next layer, the cognitive load that shapes your emotional availability long before you even notice it. Your mind handles far more information than most people realize, and that invisible workload shapes how quickly your energy drains. Every sound, detail, thought, memory, and unfinished task registers as input, even when you're not consciously aware of it. Psychologists call this cognitive load, the total mental effort required to process the world around you. For people who think deeply, this load accumulates rapidly, creating an internal pressure that builds long before any message appears. By the time you see a notification, your mind may already be stretched thin, leaving little bandwidth for even the simplest response. When your mind processes more data than average, each new task feels heavier because it arrives on top of everything already running beneath the surface. Even pleasant conversations can become another open tab in your mental browser, adding to a system that's already busy predicting outcomes, analyzing tone, recalling past interactions, and managing your emotional state. None of this feels dramatic from the outside, but internally it creates a drain that's easy to underestimate. The moment you read a message, your brain evaluates far more than the words, and that extra processing quietly consumes the energy needed to reply. This is why mental fatigue hits certain people faster. Even when their lives appear calm or ordinary, their minds remain active in the background, scanning details others overlook, holding emotional information, and anticipating responsibilities that haven't arrived yet. It's like walking through the world with multiple layers of awareness switched on simultaneously. Every small decision, every emotional cue, every unfinished task adds to the load. And when the load becomes too heavy, even small actions such as pressing send can feel strangely overwhelming. Not because the action is difficult, but because the mind has no room left to settle. For deep thinkers, this internal pressure feels normal because it has been present for years, quietly shaping their habits without drawing attention to itself. To them, the world often arrives in high resolution, with every detail carrying weight and meaning. That sensitivity creates insight, but it also creates exhaustion. Their brains don't filter as aggressively as most people's do, which means every message, every request, every notification feels like another ripple in an already full mind. When the ripples build, the system instinctively slows down, causing delays that look like avoidance but are really signs of cognitive saturation. Even positive interactions can become tiring when the mind is already overloaded. A friendly message, a simple question, or an invitation can accidentally add to the cognitive burden because it represents one more thread the brain must hold. People who experience this aren't uninterested. They're simply managing an internal landscape that others can't see. Their silence is often a sign of mental bandwidth running low, not emotional detachment. Understanding this helps make sense of why responding becomes difficult, even when the intention to reply is genuine. And this leads directly into the next pattern: the personality traits that shape how these individuals navigate connection in daily life. Some people move through life with an inner world that never truly quiets, carrying layers of awareness others rarely experience. They notice micro shifts in tone, slight changes in phrasing, subtle pauses, and emotional undercurrents that most people filter out. This heightened perception isn't something they switch on intentionally. It happens automatically, creating a mind that absorbs every detail with surprising depth. Their thoughts often run in parallel tracks, reflecting, analyzing, and interpreting while they try to maintain a calm outward expression. This constant internal activity becomes both a gift and a weight, shaping how they show up in conversations. Individuals like this process information with emotional precision, feeling things more intensely than they reveal. Their minds pick up threads others overlook, stitching together meanings from silence, small signals, and contextual cues. Because their emotional radar stays wide open, Even simple interactions can feel layered, requiring energy to navigate the unspoken elements beneath the words. This sensitivity fosters empathy, insight, and intuition. Yet it also creates an internal environment that exhausts easily. When the world feels loud, their thoughts turn louder, flooding them with interpretations they never asked for but can't turn off. These are the people whose thoughts continue long after the moment has passed, replaying conversations, evaluating reactions, and wondering what they might have missed. The brain's refusal to rest makes them deep thinkers, but also chronic overprocessors. They carry emotional information the way others carry physical weight, silently and continuously. Because they feel responsible for understanding everything, their mental space fills quickly, leaving little room for new input. When a message arrives during these moments, their mind might pause, not out of avoidance, but because it is already overloaded with unresolved thoughts demanding attention. Externally, this creates inconsistency that confuses others. They might respond instantly one day, offering thoughtful depth, and then fall silent the next without meaning to. This fluctuation doesn't reflect their care level. It reflects how their internal resources shift from moment to moment. Their emotional engine burns intensely, giving them strong connection when they have energy but shutting down when their system needs recovery. They feel everything sharply, which helps them connect deeply, yet the same sensitivity drains them faster than anyone realizes. This contrast often leads them to retreat unexpectedly to protect their psychological balance. These individuals care more than their actions sometimes show, and that care becomes the reason they collapse so suddenly. Their inner landscape is full, rich, and constantly moving, making outward simplicity difficult to sustain. They love meaningful interactions but struggle with the emotional cost of maintaining them when their mind grows heavy. Understanding the depth of their sensitivity explains why replying inconsistently isn't a lack of love or interest. It's the mind signaling that it cannot absorb more. And from here, the next layer emerges: how emotional burnout from even small interactions shapes the silence others misinterpret. There are days when even the smallest interactions feel strangely heavy, as if every message you receive adds a quiet weight to your emotional balance. A simple text, just a few words on a screen, can suddenly feel like a request you don't have the strength to meet. It isn't the message itself that drains you. It's the accumulation of countless invisible demands your mind has already been juggling. When you're in a state of emotional micro-burnout, the world begins to feel slightly overlit, slightly louder, slightly too much, and even gentle communication starts carrying the density of obligation. What should be effortless becomes something your mind instinctively steps back from, not out of disinterest, but because it needs a moment of silence from everything. In this state, a reply isn't simply typing a sentence. It's opening an emotional tab your system no longer has space to hold. Messages become weights instead of words, small reminders that your attention is being pulled in more directions than your energy can sustain. Your phone vibrates, and instead of feeling connected, you feel a subtle pressure, as if one more thing has been added to a shelf already bending under its load. Emotional burnout rarely announces itself loudly. It shows up quietly, transforming routine interactions into tasks that feel oddly monumental. The emotional cost becomes disproportionate to the action required, leaving you frozen between wanting to respond and lacking the inner stamina to do it. Modern overstimulation intensifies this pattern more than we realize. Constant pings, notifications, social expectations, and the unspoken emotional labor of staying available create a steady drain on already sensitive minds. Your brain never gets to fully close its tabs. It just keeps adding more windows, more reminders, more threads to hold. In a world where communication is instant and continuous, emotional burnout becomes cumulative. You are already holding mental noise from your day, your responsibilities, your thoughts, and your inner processing. When another message arrives, it lands on an already crowded internal table, and your mind quietly signals, "Not yet, not now." This pause isn't a failure. It's a boundary your brain enforces when you don't. What others see as a delayed reply is, for you, a moment of self-preservation. Your mind shuts down, not because of the person reaching out, but because it can't stretch any further without collapsing into deeper exhaustion. You retreat internally to conserve whatever mental and emotional resources remain, trying to breathe through the heaviness without making your world feel even smaller. And yet, this protective pause often creates a new emotional burden: guilt. The longer you don't respond, the more you feel you're letting someone down. You start rehearsing explanations, imagining their reactions, and worrying about appearing careless. This guilt doesn't motivate you to reply. It drains you further, making every passing hour feel like another layer of emotional weight. And this growing guilt becomes its own cycle, one that shapes the next stage of silence. The silence usually begins innocently, a message left for later, a reply postponed until your mind feels lighter. But as the minutes stretch into hours, something quieter and heavier settles in. You start to feel that familiar sting of guilt, the soft awareness that you should have replied by now, that someone is waiting, that your silence might be saying something you never intended. Instead of motivating you, the guilt slows you down further, turning the simple act of responding into something emotionally charged. You tell yourself you'll reply when you feel more present, more composed, more like yourself, yet the right moment never seems to arrive. As time passes, the guilt grows from a whisper into a background hum, making the idea of replying feel increasingly uncomfortable. You're not avoiding the person, you're avoiding the feeling of embarrassment, the tension of acknowledging your delay, the emotional discomfort of reconnecting after pulling away unintentionally. The longer you wait, the heavier that discomfort becomes. What was once a simple message now feels like an emotional hurdle, and each passing hour only raises the difficulty of climbing over it. You rehearse explanations in your mind, trying to craft the perfect response to bridge the gap, but the anxiety of getting it right keeps you silent. Eventually, the message becomes a symbol of everything you feel guilty about. Opening the conversation feels like exposing your own inconsistency, so you retreat instead, hoping the awkwardness will somehow fade on its own. But the guilt doesn't dissolve, it compounds. The more you avoid the discomfort, the more the silence grows, and the larger the emotional weight becomes. What started as an unintentional pause transforms into a cycle of shutting down to escape the growing pressure. It's not that you don't care about the person. You care so much that the fear of disappointing them becomes overwhelming. This loop has nothing to do with laziness or disrespect. It's a form of emotional overload that pushes you inward when you wish you could move forward. You're not careless, you're overwhelmed, caught between wanting to do the right thing and lacking the emotional bandwidth to face the discomfort you never meant to create. This guilt cycle is less about communication and more about the mind trying to protect itself from stress, embarrassment, and internal conflict. And this is where the deeper psychological roots begin to surface, revealing patterns that often trace back much further than the messages left unread. Many communication habits that seem irrational in adulthood trace back to quiet patterns formed years earlier. Some people grew up in environments where responding quickly, politely, and perfectly was expected, and any delay felt like failure. That early pressure carved an internal script that still whispers today, turning simple replies into tests of adequacy. For others, emotional expression was never modeled at all. They learned to navigate their inner world alone, without guidance, leaving them unsure how to manage connection without feeling exposed. And then there are those who developed emotional independence so early that reaching outward feels unnatural, even when they want to. Their silence isn't a choice. It's a default setting shaped long before messaging apps existed. Childhood teaches us how safe it feels to be available. If emotions were dismissed, overshadowed, or misunderstood, the adult mind learns to retreat before engaging. When you've spent years minimizing your own needs, reaching out or responding can feel like stepping into unfamiliar territory. The pressure to communicate correctly becomes overwhelming because you were never taught what correct actually looks like. You internalize an old fear of misstepping, as if every reply carries the weight of past expectations you could never satisfy. That unresolved tension lingers beneath even the simplest conversations, turning casual messages into situations charged with old emotional echoes. Social conditioning adds another layer. Many people were raised to prioritize harmony, politeness, and constant availability, while simultaneously being taught to suppress their true feelings. This contradiction creates internal conflict. Show up reliably, but never reveal fatigue. Be present, but never burden others. Over time, this creates a communication style built on performance rather than authenticity. When burnout hits, the performance collapses, leaving silence where connection used to be. This isn't disengagement. It's the mind trying to protect itself from pressures it never learned to manage. Introverted development deepens the pattern. People who spent much of their childhood observing more than speaking learn to process internally first and externally second. Their thoughts feel safer inside, unspoken, controlled. Messaging interrupts that inner rhythm, pulling them outward before they're ready. Their delay isn't avoidance. It's hesitation born from years of navigating the world quietly, cautiously, with a preference for internal clarity over external speed. All of these histories weave into the present moment, influencing why someone stops replying without meaning to. But from the outside, none of these layers are visible. Others see a gap, a pause, an unanswered message. What they rarely see is the emotional story behind it, the old patterns, the unspoken fears, the learned hesitations. And this disconnect between internal history and external perception sets the stage for the misunderstandings that shape how others interpret their silence. From the outside, silence looks simple. Someone sent a message, and you didn't reply. To others, that gap becomes an empty space they instinctively fill with assumptions. They might think you're uninterested, careless, or intentionally ignoring them. Some interpret the delay as disrespect, while others take it personally, believing your silence reflects their worth rather than your state of mind. In a world where instant communication is the norm, any pause can be misread as rejection. What they see is a lack of response. What they don't see is the emotional storm that often sits behind it. Inside you, the truth is far more complicated. You're not ignoring anyone. You're overwhelmed. Your mind is still carrying unfinished thoughts, lingering guilt, and the pressure of catching up. You care deeply, sometimes too deeply, and that makes even small missteps feel heavier. When you delay responding, it isn't because the conversation doesn't matter. It's because you want to show up fully, and you can't offer that in the moment. The fear of disappointing someone you value makes the silence stretch longer than you ever intended. What looks like indifference is usually the product of emotional exhaustion wrapped in self-awareness. This mismatch between external perception and internal reality creates a unique kind of pain. Being misunderstood hurts, especially when your intention was never to cause distance. You feel trapped between wanting to explain yourself and lacking the energy to bridge the gap. Others judge the silence, but you carry the weight of it, replaying scenarios in your mind and wondering how you're being perceived. The gap widens not because you want it to, but because you don't know how to make it smaller without exposing the exhaustion you've been trying to manage quietly. Understanding this contrast brings emotional relief. Your behavior isn't a character flaw. It's a reflection of the mental overload and emotional sensitivity that shape how you relate to others. The silence says nothing about your capacity to care. If anything, it reveals how much pressure you place on yourself to communicate thoughtfully. And realizing this difference opens the door to a more compassionate interpretation of your patterns. From here, the perspective shifts, not toward blaming yourself, but toward reframing this behavior as something rooted in strengths you may never have recognized. What feels like a flaw on the surface is often a sign of deeper psychological strengths that rarely get recognized. People who stop replying without meaning to are usually the same individuals who think carefully before they speak, who listen with genuine presence, and who refuse to offer shallow responses. Their mind doesn't rush, it processes. Their emotions don't skim the surface. They observe, absorb, and reflect. This depth makes them slower in communication, but it also makes them far more authentic. When they finally respond, their words carry intention, clarity, and sincerity, rather than automatic politeness. Their silence isn't a lack of care. It's the mind taking time to sift through details, emotions, and meanings before engaging. This internal processing creates a quieter but richer form of connection. Instead of reacting instantly, they pause to ensure their response aligns with their true feelings. Many people speak quickly and think later, but these individuals think deeply first, then choose their words. That slower rhythm isn't a weakness. It's the foundation of meaningful communication. They avoid noise because they value depth, and they avoid rushing because they value truth. Their selective attention is another hidden strength. They don't distribute their emotional energy carelessly. They conserve it for relationships and conversations that actually matter. When they show up fully, offering thoughtfulness, empathy, and understanding that others often overlook. They are not the loudest voices in the room, but they are the ones who notice the unspoken emotions beneath every interaction. This perceptiveness is rare, and while it makes them more vulnerable to overwhelm, it also makes them profoundly intuitive and emotionally intelligent. And when they do choose to speak, it comes with a depth that many people never reach. Their conversations aren't constant, but they're meaningful. Their presence isn't frequent, but it's genuine. Their replies may be late, but they're real. The world measures connection by speed. They measure it by substance. Once you see silence not as a gap, but as a moment of internal alignment, it becomes clear that their communication style carries its own strength, one rooted in thoughtfulness rather than immediacy. And that strength becomes even more evident when you look at how their inner rhythm ultimately shapes the closing arc of their psychological journey. There comes a moment when you realize that your rhythm was never meant to match the world around you. The pace others expect, the speed at which they communicate, the immediacy they treat as normal, it was never designed for a mind like yours. You move through life with a different cadence, one shaped by reflection, sensitivity, and a need for internal clarity before expression. This doesn't make you slow. It makes you intentional. It doesn't make you distant. It makes you aware. And understanding this difference is the first step toward releasing the guilt you've carried for far too long. You are not broken for needing emotional space before responding. You are not failing when your mind asks for silence instead of conversation. You are simply wired to process deeply, and depth takes time. The world rewards speed, but speed has never been your language. Your strength lies in the way you think before you speak, feel before you act, and listen before you respond. Instead of forcing yourself into the frantic pace around you, there is power in accepting the steadiness of your own. When you honor your natural rhythm, your communication becomes clearer, calmer, and more authentic, not rushed by fear or guilt, but grounded in self-understanding. There is a quiet peace that comes from realizing that your pauses are not signs of disconnection but moments of recalibration. You step back to gather yourself, to protect your emotional balance, to ensure that when you do return, you return fully. This isn't avoidance, it's alignment. It's choosing presence over performance, sincerity over speed. And the more you understand this about yourself, the easier it becomes to navigate your relationships without carrying the unnecessary burden of shame. You can't control how others interpret your silence, but you can control the story you tell yourself about it. Let that story be gentle, honest, and compassionate. As you move forward, allow yourself to respond at the pace that feels true to you. Let messages wait when your mind is tired. Let conversations breathe when your emotions feel heavy. Let connection be something you offer wholeheartedly, not hurriedly. You are not meant to operate like everyone else, and that difference is not a flaw, it is a signature. The more you embrace it, the more your world begins to feel like a place you can inhabit without shrinking or apologizing. And with that acceptance comes the clarity you've been seeking. You are not alone, you are not failing, and you are not too much or too little. You are simply yourself, steady, thoughtful, and quietly strong in ways that matter. Your rhythm deserves respect, patience, understanding, and space to breathe.